He was once the most feared king in England, a ruler who broke with the Pope, married 6 wives, and changed history forever. But in the final days of his life, Henry VIII was no longer the mighty monarch people remembered. He was a broken man, trapped in pain, paranoia, and darkness. The terrifying final days of Henry VIII. When we think of King Henry VIII, most people imagine the powerful, larger-than-life monarch who ruled England with an iron fist, the man who stood tall in shining armor, rode fearlessly into tournaments, and dazzled foreign courts with his charm and confidence. But by the last years of his reign, that image had completely shattered. The Henry of his youth was gone, replaced by a man who was physically broken, constantly in pain, and living a life of isolation and suspicion. It all started years earlier with an accident that would change the course of his life. In 1536, while jousting, one of his favorite sports, Henry was thrown from his horse. The horse landed on top of him, leaving him unconscious for hours and causing a deep wound in his leg. At first, the injury might have seemed like something he could recover from, but in reality, it never healed properly. Over time, the wound became infected, and the infection turned into large, painful ulcers. These ulcers would break open and leak, giving off a foul smell that made it uncomfortable for people to even be near the king. Medical treatments at the time were primitive, so the wound was often cauterized or wrapped tightly, but nothing could truly cure it. The injury meant that Henry could no longer exercise the way he used to. Once, he had been slim and athletic, a skilled hunter and an expert dancer. But now, he became less active, and his weight began to climb dramatically. He was known to feast on enormous meals, roasted meats, pastries, and gallons of ale and wine. By his later years, he is believed to have weighed over 400 pounds. His legs could barely carry him, and he often had to be moved around the palace in a special chair, pushed by servants. This decline in his health took a toll not just on his body, but also on his mind. Henry had always been proud of his physical strength, and losing it made him irritable and impatient. He became quick to anger, lashing out at courtiers and servants. His once famous charisma had turned into a dark and brooding presence. The court that had once been filled with music, feasts, and diplomacy was now dominated by tension and fear. In short, the mighty warrior king had become a prisoner inside his own body. Every step was a struggle, every day a reminder that the man who had ruled England with unmatched confidence was slowly being defeated, not by an enemy army, but by pain, disease, and time itself. The pain and the temper expanded. By the time Henry VIII entered the final phase of his reign, pain had become his constant companion. His leg ulcers never fully healed, and every movement sent sharp jolts through his body. The swelling, the throbbing, the burning, it was there day and night. Even lying down offered no relief. Sometimes the ulcers would burst unexpectedly, soaking through his bandages and clothes, leaving him humiliated and furious. In the Tudor era, medical care was rudimentary. Doctors could offer little more than herbal ointments, vinegar washes, or cauterization with hot irons. These treatments were often more painful than the illness itself. Imagine being one of the most powerful men in the world, yet completely helpless against your own body. That helplessness turned to frustration, and frustration often turned to rage. Henry's court became a dangerous place during these years. The king's temper had always been sharp, but now it was unpredictable, like a storm that could strike at any moment. One wrong word, one minor disagreement, or even a facial expression that Henry didn't like could end a man's career, or his life. Nobles, advisers, and even old friends walked carefully, speaking in cautious tones and avoiding anything that might anger him. Several close allies learned this lesson the hard way. Thomas Cromwell, once Henry's most trusted minister, was executed on charges that many believe were exaggerated or false. Other nobles were accused of treason based on rumors or political convenience. Sometimes The king ordered executions in moments of anger, only to regret them later. But by then, it was too late. The pain didn't just affect his political decisions, it affected his relationships at home. Henry was often short-tempered with his wives and suspicious of their loyalty. This suspicion had already cost some of them their lives earlier in his reign, and though in his final years he was married to Catherine Parr, a woman skilled at keeping the peace, the tension was always there. The once merry feasts in the palace became quieter affairs. Musicians played softly, courtiers spoke in hushed voices, and everyone was on edge, watching the king's mood as if it were the weather. Some days Henry would be in good spirits, telling jokes and recalling his glory days, but other days the pain and the anger combined into a dangerous mix, and people would find excuses to stay far away from his chambers. In these final years, the real fear in England's grand royal court wasn't war or rebellion. It was the unpredictable wrath of a king who was losing his battle against his own body. Paranoia in the palace expanded. As Henry VIII's health declined, so did his trust in the people around him. The great Tudor court, once a stage for political brilliance and royal grandeur, slowly transformed into a nest of whispers, suspicion, and fear. Every shadow in the palace seemed to hide a potential enemy. Every conversation behind closed doors felt like a conspiracy. Henry had always been a cautious ruler, but in his final years, that caution hardened into full-blown paranoia. He ordered spies to keep watch not only on political rivals, but on his own friends, advisers, and even members of the royal family. Letters were intercepted, private rooms searched, and servants questioned about their masters. People who had served the king faithfully for decades suddenly found themselves under suspicion for the smallest of reasons. An overheard remark, a late-night meeting, or even a frown during a council session. This paranoia may have been fueled by more than politics. Historians believe Henry's worsening health, possibly including untreated diabetes or hormonal imbalances from conditions like Cushing's syndrome, could have affected his mood and judgment. The constant physical pain certainly didn't help. It's hard to think clearly when every step sends fire through your leg and every night is spent tossing and turning in agony. Inside the palace, this atmosphere of fear was suffocating. Nobles spoke carefully, weighing every word. Some tried to flatter the king endlessly, hoping to stay in his good graces. Others avoided court altogether, retreating to their estates to escape his unpredictable wrath. Even the queen, Catherine Parr, was not immune. At one point, Henry became convinced that she was plotting against him, a rumor spread by those who wanted her gone. Catherine survived only by skillfully turning the accusation into a misunderstanding, humbly apologizing and reassuring Henry of her loyalty. But the damage was done. The palace was no longer a place of celebration. It had become a political battlefield. Behind the golden velvet of the royal chambers, alliances were made and broken in silence. Everyone knew that one wrong move could mean ruin or death. By the last years of his reign, Henry VIII was surrounded not by loyal friends, but by carefully chosen survivors, people who had learned to navigate his moods and his mistrust. And yet, even they could never be sure how long they would last. For in the great halls of the Tudor court, the most dangerous thing was not the foreign enemy beyond England's shores. It was the suspicious mind of the king himself. His last love and final betrayals expanded. In the final years of his life, Henry VIII found a measure of peace and companionship with his sixth and last wife, Catherine Parr. Unlike some of his previous wives who faced tragic ends, Catherine was clever, cautious, and skilled at navigating the dangerous waters of the Tudor court. She was not only a loving partner, but also acted as a nurse and caretaker, attending to Henry's worsening health with great patience. Catherine Parr was much younger than Henry and had a sharp mind, especially in religious matters. She was known for her Protestant beliefs during a time when England's religion was still a battleground between Catholicism and the new Church of England. Despite the risk, she influenced Henry to be more tolerant in religious affairs, hoping to secure a smoother future for the kingdom. However, even Catherine's intelligence and charm could not completely shield her from the paranoia and political intrigue swirling around the king. At one point, rumors began to spread that Catherine was plotting against Henry. Some nobles, jealous of her influence, whispered lies to the already suspicious king, suggesting that she might have ambitions to control the throne or harm him. Henry, consumed by his illness and mistrust, nearly had Catherine arrested and imprisoned. The court held its breath as the king's wrath loomed dangerously close, but Catherine, using her wit and loyalty, managed to calm Henry's fears. She spoke humbly, expressing her devotion and love, and reassured him that she had no designs against him. Her quick thinking saved her life and allowed her to remain queen until Henry's death. Despite this close call, the final days of Henry VIII were marked by betrayal and loss. Many of his old allies had either died, been executed, or fallen out of favor. The once mighty king found himself surrounded by fewer friends and more cautious subjects who whispered behind his back. He had alienated powerful nobles and church leaders, leaving a fragile political landscape. At the same time, Henry's children were also caught in the turbulent legacy he left behind. His only legitimate son, Edward, was still a boy when Henry died, and his daughters, Mary and Elizabeth, faced uncertain futures. The king's harsh decisions and changing alliances during his lifetime had left the country deeply divided. But through all the betrayals, the illness, and the fears, Catherine Parr remained a constant presence. She not only cared for Henry's body, but also tried to heal the wounds in his kingdom. Her influence helped shape the future of England, even as Henry's terrifying final days drew to a close. In the shadow of death, Henry VIII's last love stood strong, a quiet reminder that even the most powerful monarchs are human, vulnerable, and sometimes saved by those closest to them. The end of the Tudor giant. By the cold winter of 1547, the once powerful King Henry VIII was barely recognizable. Years of illness, injury, and excessive weight had taken their toll. The painful ulcers on his legs worsened to the point that he could hardly walk. His massive body was swollen and weak, and breathing became a struggle. Confined mostly to his chambers in the Palace of Whitehall, Henry was attended by doctors who, despite their best efforts, could not halt his decline. The mighty Tudor king, who had once ruled England with unmatched strength and passion, was now facing his final moments. On January 28, 1547, Henry VIII passed away at the age of 55. His death marked the end of a turbulent and transformative reign. Henry's rule was full of dramatic moments, from breaking England away from the Catholic Church and founding the Church of England to his 6 marriages that forever changed royal history. Behind all the power and glory, his last years were marked by pain, suspicion, and isolation. His young son, Edward VI, inherited the throne, but England remained fragile and divided. Henry's daughters, Mary and Elizabeth, would go on to rule and face their own challenges in a kingdom still struggling with the consequences of their father's decisions. The Tudor story was far from over, but Henry's terrifying final days closed a dramatic chapter in English history. Despite his power, Henry's life is a reminder that even the greatest rulers are vulnerable to the forces of illness, time, and fate. His legacy of strength and brutality shaped England's future, yet his final days reveal the human side of a king consumed by pain and mortality. If you found Henry VIII's final days as fascinating as we did, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. Your support helps us bring more incredible historical stories right to your screen. And don't forget, next up, we'll dive into the thrilling and dramatic lives of Henry's daughters, Mary and Elizabeth Tudor. Their fight for the throne is filled with secrets, betrayals, and unforgettable moments you won't want to miss. So hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to stay updated. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.